right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Christ Church for Our Communities testimony time. At Christ Church for Our Community, Dr. Frank M. Smith Jr. is the pastor here. I'm Minister T. Watkins, and I'm here with Brother Shawn Leggacy, one of the members here at the church. And Brother Shawn has agreed to, he wanted to share his testimony of his life and where God has brought him from and to where he is now. And so we're just going to get right into it. Brother Shawn Leggacy, this is your time. We want you to tell us what you want to share. And we just pray that it'll be a blessing to someone's life. And that's why we do these. Testimonies mean that you've had some tests in your life. And you're saying that God has brought you through some things. So we just appreciate you being willing to share your testimony to help others.
I guess before I start, I'm going to say stuff like a couple of explanations. I'm very much an introvert person, which is not a bad thing. It's a blessing from God. Also, I've come to recognize that I was born with a gift of being sensitive to others. But both things, the introversion and the sensitivity, even though they're gifts from God, can be used by Satan to cause you all kinds of problems in life. So what is a gift sometimes seems like a curse. Well, I can remember way back when I was a little kid. I was probably, 6, 7 years old. I can't remember the exact times back then. Nobody can. But I grew up under a situation where my father was an abusive man. He wasn't violent, though, and that's what people get confused. What do you mean he wasn't violent, but he was abusive? Well, he would hit me, but he didn't do it out of anger. He did it more out of laziness, but it still caused damage. My sister liked to start fights with me. And so when she did that, he would end up coming into the room, giving her a hug, and hit me in one way or another. He did a lot of stupid things. I was sat in my mom's lap when I was probably around that age, and my dad came to the room with a hairbrush and hit me across the head with a hairbrush really hard. She said, "Why did he do that?" And he said, "Well, he did something wrong a couple of weeks ago. I thought I should cover that." So he really had no sense. But what it left me with as time went on is that I was in his way. I was a burden. I don't ever remember him giving me anything positive. If he were to pick me up, it's because everybody pushed him to do so, because I was getting tired walking as a little kid. And he didn't want to do it, but everybody pushed him to do it. Well, I heard all this stuff. And I can't remember him ever teaching me anything that I could walk away from, where I've had many people in my life give me something. Even if they were a mess, they gave me something I could think about that was positive. So I had to grow up under that. My mom went through a lot of issues and a lot of problems because she had gone through traumas herself. And especially with churches years ago, there was nobody there you could talk to. She had nobody to help her through the issues. She had nobody to be able to work things out. She's also an introvert type. And because of her past of abuse, the rough times she went through in the neighborhood she grew up, and things that her parents couldn't help her deal with. My grandparents, her parents, were good to me in many ways, but I don't think they were ready and knew how to be a parent. So as I grew older, growing up and went to school, my personality was the type that isn't aggressive. I'm not going to, so I was usually picked on. And one good example, one time I was coming home from school and this kid was picking on me and everything else, and I ended up punching him. Probably the one time I did that in my whole life. And I went back home. He lived across the street. And I felt so upset that I had punched him because I didn't believe I had the right to hit another person. I went across the street and apologized to him. He gave me a funny look. It probably didn't matter to him. But I'm saying that because it gives you an idea of what kind of person I was compared to what I experienced and how it made me feel. So from age 12 to about 16, I had no friends, nobody connected to. Um, Around age 10, there was a family member in my life who thought that it was okay for me to have a beer. And so I drank that beer, and actually I became addicted to it. I was not a person to go out and party with people, partially because I was not a person to go out with groups and with people. If I did meet anybody at some point in my life before 12, I met individuals. I did not feel comfortable in groups. I still don't. I have to work through that. But so I wasn't going to be influenced by peer pressure as far as groups, but I could be influenced by one person. Anyway, so this family member supplied this alcohol. Why did I drink as I went along? To the taste? Yeah, that was okay. But I drank because I was suffering from depression. And for a little while, I was able to let some of that go. And I drank up till about 16, 17 years old. Not all the time, but I still became an alcoholic. People are under the misconception that being an alcoholic, you have to drink all the time, and you don't. If you're dependent on the alcohol, if you somehow have withdrawals from the alcohol after a certain point, I mean, you can be addicted to it. And probably this is where today, not then, I recognize that being an introvert saved me from being involved in more drinking and drugs and stuff like that because I didn't like the group.
So when did you say you started at 10?
Around 10 years old.
When did you realize, like, when did you think you were addicted?
I really don't remember that completely. Probably 15, 16 years old when I probably heard more about alcoholic problems and things like that. But I just kind of let things, I was in one small little world. The world out there didn't like me. I didn't fit in as far as I was concerned. I was alone. I spent many hours thinking about suicide. I felt like I was a burden or a mistake. And again, my mom has done a lot of things for me, but during that time, she struggled herself. She couldn't identify things for herself because she didn't have, churches back then were not much help. And then she had gone away from the church, disenchanted with things. And so I had gone away with it too during that time. Actually, with all these things that went on, I came back to this church as a really a strange type of happening. But God uses strange types of things. I must have been right about 16 years old, and I was a member of the Churches of Christ. And so the Churches of Christ are always right. And so even though I wasn't attending, I still had this idea, well, this is exactly what it has to be. And so we were talking to a friend, and I don't remember exactly what I was said, but I was doing that little Church of Christ thing saying, they were Catholic and say, this is wrong and this is what you have to do. And then she started pressing it. So I started looking up some scriptures. I got my mom to look up scriptures and gave it to her. Finished. And she walked away, but something happened to me. The next Sunday, I listened to an Elvis Presley record singing gospel music and took some emblems for communion. I think it was only orange juice and some, but it did something for me. And within a week, I went to a church a week after that. It wasn't the best example church. It was an anti-cooperation church, very, very cold, but it was a beginning. And then I ended up going to a Church of Christ where it had youth ministries and campus ministries. And so I was on this high to a point, but I was so, in many ways, I had love for my grandparents, but neither sets of my grandparents were spiritual. And my mom was struggled. My dad and my mom split up when I was about 12 or 13. And to back it up a little, it was interesting when they told me, I had gone away to Missouri to be with some relatives. When I came back, they took me out to eat and said that they had split up. And I had mixed emotions. Part was, oh no. And the other part was, thank God, because my dad wasn't going to be there. Wow. And because all I ever knew was getting hit by him. I mean, it's not that it happened all the time, but there was never a positive moment. You know, some people who get disciplined, so it may not be any harder than being disciplined, but when that's all there is, and there's no love demonstrated with it, it becomes abusive. I believe in corporal punishment in situations, but it has to be done out of love. There was no love on that part at all. So I went into the church getting some positive things and expecting. It's kind of confusing. It's almost like I knew people weren't perfect, but now I expected things to be perfect. And I was still dealing with that self-esteem issue, deeply self-esteem issues, and people were taller than me, probably much more taller than they actually were, because I felt lower than them, less valued than them. Well, you think that the church should be all the solutions, but sometimes it's not. In fact, it never completely is, because no matter what church you go to, you've got a major problem that's there: people. Because people have problems. Some people have more problems than others. And when you're impressionable, see, when you're in that age, I'm soaking everything in my head, trying to get everything in my head, and I'm believing pretty much everything that's taught to me because I am impressionable. And eventually it would lead to me studying, especially as I heard contrasting views from different people. But I didn't hear so much at first. Well, one of the things that I thought was a blessing, but turned out to be a major curse in some ways, is that when one Sunday they had what was called Theme Sunday at the church, where they were preaching something, and then people would have cell groups they would go to and talk about that theme, eat and have the theme. And so I went to one of these cell groups, and the husband and wife there had a son. We'll call him Mark. That's just a made-up name, but we'll just call him Mark for a moment. And he befriended me, which was awesome. You know, I was still learning and stuff, but he really turned out to be a friend, but he was very childish and very immature, and he wasn't really spiritual. But the problem is I was torn between trying to be spiritual and do the right thing, and part of me thought, well, I can be a good influence on him. Well, the other part was desperate for companionship and friendship. And anyway, he ended up going away to college for a little bit, and he came back, and we reconnected. I actually stayed with his family for a while, which was probably a major mistake because other things happened. And let's just say, without going into every detail, he traumatized me in ways that are severely damaging to any human being. And like usual, I blame myself for the entire thing. It was all my fault. Well, at the same time, we were attending a church that split off from the church I went to because they didn't believe in certain issues, and it made sense to me, so I went there. But the church here I am, probably about 17, 18 years old this time, and they were arguing about different things, and they had these men there who literally almost got into a brawl, a fist fight. And I'm sitting here going, I'm just thinking to myself, where's God in this whole thing? But I'm young. I say some things, but I probably would say a whole lot more today at the response. Like, you know, you're supposed to be setting an example for me. What am I looking at here? But again, so the past has never gone away. People think that the best way to move on as a Christian is just to put everything behind you. Well, that doesn't work so well unless you've dealt with it, unless you understand it. Shortly after that, I decided that I was going to go to a different congregation. My decision was to go to a church that was growing, and that church happened to be predominantly African American. That didn't really faze me one way or the other. I'm going to go there because it's African American, or should I go there because that wasn't even, they were growing. And of course, that's where I met you, which was 41 years ago. And we kind of haphazardly got connected, and which was been a great blessing for me. But in the meantime, I had still had major trauma. Besides my trauma as a kid, I had had this major trauma from this one person who I thought was my friend, who I thought was a brother in Christ, occurred just months before that I was just pushing down. And on top of the physical abuse of my father, on top of my mom not being able to handle things many years, and she's come so far today. I'm so proud of her. But I just wanted to focus on doing certain things. And I came to the church, and really that was the beginning of an eye-opener. Now, I want to say first, my mom taught me something when I was a kid. See, because we're all born, especially every Caucasian person in this country is born into racism, whether they want to know that or not, because we're born into a system of racism. And if nothing else happens to prevent that, you will be indoctrinated in this country into a racist society, and you will conform to it. Did I conform to some of the racist society? Yes. But my mom taught me certain things. She taught me from the get-go that African Americans had been in slavery, and that it was wrong, that there is no difference between black and white people. We're all human beings, all people created by God, that people shouldn't treat people like that. She told me a story when she was in high school in Minnesota, that she talked to a black girl, and after that, neither black or white would talk to her for an entire year. So she told me enough. And then she told me certain words not to say and certain things. She told me enough to where that indoctrination was broken to some degree. But coming to this church, I didn't know that I was going to learn a whole lot, which would transform my life in a positive way. I ended up going to school, dealt with different things. I was down in the state of Alabama. On top of the trauma I had been through, I ended up getting assaulted by 5 gentlemen. I was beaten, my head split open several places, my tendons were cut, so I couldn't move my thumbs, had to go through surgery. And what did I do with it? Pushed it down.
And you were working a job, right?
I was delivering pizza.
You was delivering pizza. You got robbed.
They followed me,
Okay.
and I was a manager.
Okay.
And so I didn't really do anything but one trip. And my car wasn't working, so I took my manager's car. And it happened to be that the people who attacked me were African American. To me, that doesn't matter. There are people who can attack you no matter what, but it happened to be. And my father's father, he was racist. And I still love him because he did things for me, but he was racist. And he asked me, were they black? And I hated to tell him yes, because to me, it still didn't matter. But because I was traumatized and couldn't remember what they looked like exactly, every time I saw an African American for a while, I jumped. And I was mad at myself for feeling that way. Not because I believed that African Americans were this, that, or the other, but because I had been traumatized. And I got through it to a point. And to relate church experience into it, I had a person at church, we'll call him Mr. Window. He was a medical tech and had me come over to his house. He was going to change my bandages. And I'm saying this because we don't realize how church people do a lot of damage to people too. He changed my bandages, but it was the coldest experience I ever had. I felt like I was in his way. I was a burden, even though he did something positive for me. And see, I've experienced that so much in churches that people don't really know how to care about other people, that asking somebody how they're dealing with what happened, being sensitive to other people. And the thing is, through my church experience, I always believed these things, but because I had such a low self-esteem, whenever I came up with resistance in different ways because the church pushed it, I would doubt myself. But today, I believe I was right, even if it had to be fine-tuned. And so, as you know, you left Minnesota, you went to Texas and came back to Louisville. I had come back to Minnesota, and I went through some other experiences. I tried to help different people, worked with them, but I become attached, which is nothing wrong with that to a point. But when you're trying to build somebody up spiritually, they would do wrong, or they would fall off and do it. I blame myself. It's all my fault because they didn't do what was right, that I was a failure in trying to teach them. This may seem a little jumbled to a point, but this is a history of when we're traumatized, even though we're trying to do the things that are right. Some people just put it behind you. It doesn't work that way so much.
Now, had you ever dealt with any of the trauma at that point?
Not really. I just suppressed it. I just pushed it back, and what it was doing to me, and I didn't realize I would go through doing really well, and then I would go through a deep depression, and then I'd come back up, and then I would go through deep depression.
Now, we've talked many times about struggles that you've had, and you've told me about many struggles and many traumas, many things that you've gone through, and then I shared some things that I had gone through. And I don't know if you remember what you said to me when I was sharing mine. You said the difference is you had support. And I did. I had a lot of, I had family, I had church, I had friends. I've had support my whole life. No, so I went through stuff, but I've always had support. Could you speak to what you meant when you said that?
Well, yes, because you could have 5 people go through the same. It probably wouldn't be the same. But let's just say they went through the exact same situations. One person may come out hardly feeling anything from it. Another person may have some problems at work, and another person could be totally devastated. But it all depends, one, on our personalities, how we react to things, which again doesn't mean our personalities are bad. It just means that we can be hurt in different ways, but they're meant to be a gift. Or it can be that you don't have the support. My dad wasn't helpful. My mom was going through problems, and she needed help herself. And my grandparents were not spiritual people. It just wasn't what I needed to go through that. And I had no friends. I had nobody to talk to. And so and being an introvert, I didn't mix well with people. Again, not that introversion's wrong, but when you've been traumatized on top of it, it makes it harder because the introversion can become a negative thing. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be a gift from God. But so without having that strong person around you, say the whole family is poor, but you have a loving family, you may not notice so much that you're poor. But when you're isolated and alone and have no one there to support you, or you get blamed for something, or when you do something wrong, you're shunned and made to feel like you're less, it makes things incredibly worse. So there's plenty of people out here probably going through worse, and some of them may fare better than what I did. Now, before, how did I look at that? Well, that just means that I'm totally worthless. And one thing that church people tend to do when they come up and say, how are you doing? I've had this happen a few times. And I say, well, I'm struggling. They would tell you, well, you're a Christian. You should be happy. And what would I do? I'd walk away and say, I should be. I mean, I guess I'm much more pitiful than I thought I was. Because sometimes we are supposed to be this, that, and the other, but no human being is perfectly. But we say those statements to somebody because we've been told to say those statements. But instead, people need to be accepted, need to be loved. It's actually God's love coming, something that comes directly to us, and it goes through other people. We need other people. We just don't need people who are going to take us away from God. We need people who are going to bring us closer to God. And that's what you did compared to this other person who really took me away from God. Even though I didn't leave God, I did. With you, it helped. Not that you've been perfect, but you have had a godly heart, and that's transformed me. Anyway, I had another situation in Minnesota with another person I tried to help. And again, I blame myself for it when it went bad. but it was too much. This is where I reached the breaking point. This is where I fell apart and I had an emotional breakdown. Now, people have different levels of emotional breakdowns, but I was a bus driver. I am currently as well. And I literally would drive to the end of one line and cry for 10 minutes and then go back to the other end of the line and cry for 10 minutes. And I did that pretty much for 3 months because everything that I had been through was too much. And I was suicidal. I was also desperate. Were all those walls of protection? To a point, I was now open. I reached out to you, and which is interesting because you and I had a misunderstanding, which was no big deal, but it was. And I reached out to you to come down and visit you here, and I did that. If I hadn't done that, I may not have reached out to you after. And that is the reason I'm still alive today, because I was able to reach out to you. I talked to other people. We're all good. You were probably the biggest key. Through this whole experience, there was the ending, or not the ending, but a crucial moment too. We are here that God loves us, and we believe it, but we don't. And that was with me because I didn't understand love. I thought I did. But something happened on New Year's Eve. I believe we're talking about 88. It doesn't matter for people out here, but it was around that time. And I went through a complete hysteria. If you've ever seen people in movies or in real life where people are just talking nonsense, just going off the top of their head, then that's where I was. I sent a we didn't have cell phones back there. This is back in the dinosaur age when we had regular phones, and we did have pagers. So I sent you a page and you called me back. And I was on the phone with you and I said several times, I'm sorry, because I was feeling so guilty as well as so much in pain that I was a mess and you had to deal with it. And you said, it's all right. It's okay. And you said it several times. And I have referenced it many times. I've told you this. That is the moment that I realized that God loved me. I saw God's love through your actions. And so while I've still gone through many years of struggling, that was a huge turning point for me. And then I had a goal that I had told you before I broke down, that I was going to bicycle from Minnesota down to Louisville, Kentucky. And one thing about my personality is I hate saying something and not doing it. So I did that following June. And that's another thing that kept me going because I had something to look forward to. Okay, so.
And yes, this is a bicycle, not a motorcycle.
No, it's a bicycle.
It's a bicycle. He rode his bicycle from Minnesota to Louisville.
Yes.
Okay, how many?
It was 858.3 miles. And it was in 10 days with 3 days of rest. It was 100 miles more, I believe, than driving a car, because I had to go around certain things where I couldn't go on the freeway. So sometimes it took me way around to get around that. But now I had some type of victory. I was never good in sports. I was always the kid who was put, not picked. You know, it's like, I'm the only one left. What do we do with him? Well, you take him. And so, I mean, I didn't love sports, but it was still an idea that no one wanted me to be there. And so now I rode this bicycle. Nobody's with me. And I did it. And I'm not talking about a boasting pride, but it was a feeling that I accomplished something. And so these victories, God gives us these victories to help us out till we can see things better. So I'm still learning about, I'm hearing this is not all exact order, but throughout the time in Minnesota, the preacher started to transform himself. Not as Church of Christ as he was. And he's talking to a predominantly African-American church, and he's talking about racial issues. And so I'm sitting there hearing different things. I'm not the person to object to anything real quick. I think about it and I walk away. And many things I had never heard before, like Jesus wasn't white. Well, now that I've studied, I come to realize he definitely wasn't white. Now, it wasn't, a lot of people are really upset about that. It was just different to me. It was different than what I had been pre-programmed to believe in this society. Well, that progressed on until several years ago. I decided to do something different in my career. It didn't work out, but it gave me the idea that I could move, and I relocated down here. And I'm going through that real quickly. But even while I've been here, I have struggled because of all this back stuff. Because when you're told, and I'm just using examples here, it isn't necessarily exact. When you're told 5,000 times that you're ugly, or you're 5,000 times you're stupid, or 5,000 times that you're not worth anything. They don't always have to be told in words, by the way. They can be told by the reactions of people around you. That's what you believe. And if somebody comes up and tells you you're handsome or you're intelligent stuff one time, that lasts for about 5 minutes. Then the next challenge comes along. You're ugly, you're stupid, you're worth nothing. And so me coming here, first of all, I wasn't sure that you really want me to be here. I mean, I asked you, because I was worried that I might be in the way. But I wanted to be here. But all this stuff was telling me something different. You were in Minnesota, okay, but now you've gone there. Do you really want me following in there? And of course, this wasn't on your mind, but this was on my mind. I did come here. Things went okay for a while. Then I went through some challenges. I went down, and I wouldn't. I needed to talk to you, but I wouldn't do it because I felt like I was a burden. My mind would blow it up to 3 to 20 times bigger than it was. Then I'd finally write this long letter, and you say, "Hold on, hold on, hold on," and you had to tell me, I don't know how many times since I've been here, you're not a burden to me, so let's just get rid of that language. I've come a long ways because today, I don't like to say anything 100% because that's usually when you fall into a pit. But for the most part, I don't feel like a burden. And I think you said here that you started opening up to me. And so when I felt useful to you, that helped too. See, because we really need each other, but we act like we don't. And partially because we've been burned so many times, we act like we don't need it, So yes, I'm a 41-year recovering alcoholic. Yes, I've had gone through emotions and stuff, but I believe it's all for a purpose. Do I still struggle with self-image? Some. And it might be more tomorrow, I don't know. But each step has helped me to get farther along. And we have had many different discussions about racial issues and all kinds of things. And it really started, you pointed this out to me, because I asked you when we first met and started talking, what did you notice about me? And you told me that I wanted to know how you felt about things. And so, because I remember asking you, what has been your experience with this? How do you see this? And that was the beginning of a process that's still going on, but we've come a long ways. And so my mindset has transformed through my experiences in this country to where I am today and what I'm going to do. I'm still a struggling person. I will never be a person who doesn't need God. And nobody else will be there either, even if they think so. And I also need people. Being an introvert, I don't necessarily want a ton of people. I could have another person in my life. Introverts tend to go for the gold. When they connect with people, they put everything into a connection with people. But it is difficult for me because I've got this introversion and this sympathy that were given by God, but I've also got this trauma that sometimes like to weed back in.
So, where are you now? What's God brought you to? What are you?
Well, after a lot of experience, the past actually 10 years, I thought about at some point writing a book. What was interesting, the book was related to some of the things I think about now, but not all of them. And it went along more and more till it was dealing with this understanding of how this country was formed and church involved into it and where we need to be, but where we are. Finally, something changed, and I decided that I was not going to do the book, partially because my skills are better at speaking than perhaps writing, and secondly, really secondly, because the book would be one time and done, and it would take me a while to get there when I wanted the message to get out there faster. So while I still have things to learn, this April in 2025, I started a YouTube channel dealing with, I call it American Christian or Christian American. And I'm dealing with the idea what the church should be as opposed to what it is, and dealing with the issues of what Christianity has done, because God is always right, but mankind is not. And there is a history of white supremacy and bigotry and racism that is based in the church. Not come from the outside, but based in the church. Because people left, they started to go away from God's word all the way back in Catholicism, where they let the Roman government come in and they influenced it, and it became something that it was not supposed to be. We can still worship God the way he intended to, but if we follow this history, this country was founded on racism, bigotry, and hate, all from within churches.
How did you learn about racism?
Well, again, it goes back partially to my mother teaching me some basics. It came back to listening to preachers and many conversations that we've had. One thing, I had to learn to define racism, because most people do not define racism or use the word the way it is. You see, every human being can hate. Every human being can be prejudiced. Every human being can belittle and degrade and dehumanize another human being. But only people who look like me, only Caucasians in this country can be racist. People say, oh, no, that's not true. Hold on. We have to understand what the word means. Racism indicates the idea that it indicates that there is a group of people who have the political, psychological, financial power to affect the lives of another group of people. Only white people in this country have the political power to withhold funds for education, to make laws that make it harder for people to get jobs, or institute laws that make it better. Only white people have the power to redline districts in this country. Only white people have the power to use the governmental forces to do mass murders and slaughters within the history of this country. And it's still alive and well today. So only white people can be racist. But yes, everybody can be prejudiced, everybody can hate. But think of racism as a group thing. It is an individual thing because all white people are born into it, and we are indoctrinated from day one in schools talking about a false history, about lies, making white people look better, having white people take credit for what African Americans have done in history. All these things are indoctrinated to us as a kid. So we live in a racist system.
So, the title of your podcast is American Christian or Christian American. What is your goal of this YouTube channel?
Well, first of all, this is my shirt with it, with an emblem with it. And I don't know if anybody can see this, but over here you have Christian American, and it has a flag. The idea that the United States Constitution is dominant with God's word in there. And with that is Christian nationalism. Those who believe that the United States should be a Christian country, which I agree with to a point, but not in the way they mean it. We all need to worship God. The country should turn to God. But they believe in using political power, or God's word, to invoke political power in a way that makes white people superior. Where Christianity is about putting God over here, Christian American, meaning Christianity's first, but yet I happen to be in America. So I do have some American roots, but my basis for my existence is Christianity. So what's my goal? My goal is to wake up the awareness of people. Some African Americans may not understand all the history, but most of them understand a great deal. But those who can reach our African American to broaden it or even encourage, because I'm willing to talk about it. And with Caucasians and everybody else, but especially Caucasians, to get them to realize that Caucasians don't have to be superior to be valued. We are all supposed to be human beings, all supposed to be valued, all supposed to be together. And we're not meant to be superior. We have to get over the lies that have been told. And in order for us to truly worship God, we have to be able to be together. Really, in churches in America, we are segregated, black and white churches. Why? Well, first of all, white people didn't want black people in the churches. They weren't good enough to be in there. In fact, they had, the British came out with the slave Bible, which deleted a whole lot of things as they went on missionaries. It was meant to use verses to condition people to be slaves, but not about freedom. So there is dishonesty within churches. I want to see people come to God and worship God the way he was meant to be worshiped. I don't want people to sit here and say Jesus was white when he wasn't. I don't want people to think the first people in the world created were white when they weren't. White people didn't come along until sometime after Tower of Babel when people were spread. That doesn't make white people less valuable. They're still part of God's kingdom. The only thing that makes us less valuable is when we have to lie about our history to justify ourselves.
So you are white.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that I like the word Caucasian.
You're Caucasian.
Yes.
You're a white brother with a little melanin.
Yes. My melanin sits on a little shelf.
Okay. You could ignore all this. You could ignore racism and go about your life. Why are you putting yourself out like that?
Well, first of all, I understand what you mean saying I could ignore it, but I will say I can't, okay? But you're right. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is Caucasian people who it doesn't affect, and so they don't pursue it because they're not being bothered by it, and they don't care enough to look beyond themselves. And many times they will deny all these things exist unless something really big happens, like George Floyd. And then they'll act like, well, this is out of the ordinary, when it's not. It's just that more cameras are out there. But they will do everything they like to ignore it. They'll vote like they ignore it. They don't really have close relationships with black people. If they do have a relationship with black people, they think it's hunky-dory. I don't know what the African-American might think. But they don't really care enough to look down into it. I can't do that because, one, it just isn't right. But two, the people who have been most transformative to my life have been African-Americans. I have to care about people who have bothered to care about me. But it's not just that. It's just that I look at different things African Americans do and the reasons why they do them. Am I saying African Americans are perfect? No. There are plenty messed up African Americans who are hateful and all that stuff. But this world makes it look like black people are bad, white people are great. And that's just not true. There are people of all different groups of people. And by the way, it's not different races. We are all 99.9% identical, so it's impossible for us to be separate races. But that's where racism came from, the idea that white people had to separate us and elevate themselves. And that's just not true. We are all part of the same family. I may have come from Europe, but the people from Europe came from the African region. So I really came from Africa. I just took a detour, you know.
So American Christian or Christian American, Brother Shawn Wesley Leggacy, you can go to his YouTube channel, and he speaks on many different topics and touches all, sorts of things. I'm going to talk about this one thing, then I'm going to ask you another question, and then we're going to just direct people to your channel, and we'll let you close out with some final comments. But one of your podcasts dealt with this little book here. It's called The Negro Motorist Green Book.
Yes.
Tell us about what's this green book about?
Well, it's something that
I know what it's about, but I'm gonna let you
right, because you actually told me about it.
Yeah.
And but the Green Book, what I find interesting about this book is, first of all, I want to point out that this book is just a few pages, very few, and it got bigger. It got bigger as it went along, but it still was a small book. So what is it? Well, before the civil rights movement, black people, just think about this. Right now, everybody in this country, for the most part, and African Americans included, for the most part, if you're traveling, can go to any hotel that you want. There might still be some racism, but for the most part, you can go to any hotel you want and get a room. You don't have to book ahead necessarily. You can, but you don't have to. If there's a convention, you might, well, I better. You can go to any restaurant for the most part. There are still some issues out there. Or you can go to any mechanic. You do worry about whether there can be a ripoff or not, but not necessarily worrying about it because you're black. But before the civil rights movement, a lot of places wouldn't take black people into their establishments, their restaurants, their hotels, and there were towns that were downright dangerous and life-threatening. This book listed black-friendly hotels, restaurants, and any other establishment that they might need. And then it also warned about certain towns to go to. But what I had talked about is, can you imagine your life being restricted to this small little book, while other people who look different from you didn't have to worry about that? And that's important. The more we frame this, and there are several African Americans who might not know about this, there's probably a lot that do, but definitely probably very few white people know about this. And see, this country is trying to erase our history presently with the present administration, wants to get rid of pictures of slaves being beaten and all this other stuff, because the more they can condition the white people to believe certain things, the more power they can maintain. The more white people are exposed to this, some, not all, probably not even the majority, but some will begin to realize what this country has been and what it could be if it was different.
So are you afraid of the reaction that you might get because you're discussing these issues?
I'm not encouraging the reaction, but I'm not going to shut up about the reaction, because I would rather live shorter and be right with God and right with what I need to talk about than if I were to live longer and live a miserable life where I focus on all my misery and don't do something that means something. It's important for me to actually do something that is beneficial to other people, so my life has a purpose.
All right, so God's brought you a long way.
longer than I probably even know myself.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your testimony, sharing your story. Um, Again, go to American Christian or Christian American,
Well, the easiest way they can probably find it is by typing in my full name,
Shawn Wesley
but
Legacy.
spell it Shawn, Shawn, Wesley, Wesley, and Legacy, Leggacy. And then type in American after that. You might have to type American Christian or Christian American, but more than likely, if you just type in American after my name, it'll come right up.
Got it. Got it. Well, we thank you. Why don't you just close us out with a message or whatever you want to say to the people
Well,
about
I
your
guess
testimony?
just, I want people to think we have been indoctrinated with an American ego. We talk all the time about the United States is the best country in the world. And that's not true. But as long as we believe the ego, we will never transform this country that could possibly be the best country in the world. We have to get over the American ego. We have to own the true history of this country in order to make the history a better place. And if you're Caucasian, you have to start to realize that you are a human being more than you are Caucasian. Be a human being. Don't be ashamed of being white, but don't live your life like the whole thing is important because you're white.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, sharing your testimony. CCFOC's testimony time. We thank you for looking in on it, and hope that it's a blessing to you. All right, we'll see you next time. Thank you.